Hey everybody, it's Carson Gourdie, the Sport Taker for Fox, Illinois, and Champaign. And Illinois football is heading into one of its most important stretches yet under head coach Brett Bielema. Brett Bielema has elevated the program from just hoping to make a bowl game to one of the top half programs in the conference. But it's going to be important for Brett Bielema to stick the landing and finish strong in November. Everybody remembers 2022. Illinois ranked number 14 in the country, 7-1. Dark horse to make the college football playoff, and they finished the year 8-5. Last year, they started 5-5. They just needed one more win to make a bowl game. They lost to Iowa, Northwestern back to back. Those are two Novembers that have held back Illinois in the eyes of the national media, of creating more momentum. Now, Illinois, they have lost two consecutive games, but they still got a really good shot to finish off a great year. They're 6-3, but there's a very real chance they finish 9-3. Michigan State, Rutgers, Northwestern, those are manageable games for Illinois to win. And according to CBS and the recent projection, that would mean Illinois would play in the Citrus Bowl. And now I know that's not the college football playoff, but that's still December 31st. Disney World, playing a really good SEC team. I mean, that is a big step for the Illinois football program. But we've seen with Illinois, they've had good wins this year. Nebraska, Michigan, they come to mind. But they've also played dangerous games against a Kansas team that's not that good. Purdue, they beat them 50-49 in overtime. So none of those last three games are guaranteed wins. And the bowl situation is very fluid. Right now, yeah, it's projected they could go to the Citrus Bowl. But they drop a game. They might be dropping in Nashville and playing in the Music City Bowl. You drop two games. You're playing in North Carolina in the Belk Bowl. You lose all three games. You're going to be spending Christmas in Detroit at the Motor City Bowl. Now this week, they're taking on a Michigan State team that has been extremely inconsistent. To the naked eye, you might not think they're a good football program at 4-5. But to people who follow the sport in late college football, they are a very competent team and much improved compared to last year.
I mean, I know that the record says that they're under 500, but you look at the way they played this year, they've played teams closer. They've played teams better. It doesn't mean that they're coming away with wins necessarily, but something is just different about that program overall. And I think it's just being a year removed from everything that happened.
Michigan State last season dealt with a lot of turmoil. Their head coach, Mel Tucker, was fired after allegations of having an inappropriate relationship with a female. And the season went down to a nosedive. They finished 4-8. They were probably lucky to win 4 games. And they had the worst offense in college football, scoring only 16 points per game. Illinois cleaned house. They got rid of Mel Tucker. They pretty much got rid of that entire staff, got rid of a bunch of players, and they hired Jonathan Smith. He's the proven program builder from Oregon State just a couple years ago. You're looking at some of the games against Michigan State. They outgained Michigan by 100 yards, but they lost Michigan by 7 points. Michigan made a couple trick plays, and they're able to steal that game from Michigan State. And they also lost a crazy game to Boston College earlier in the year, 23-19. And what's been Michigan State's downfall has been sloppy quarterback play. Aiden Childs transferred from Oregon State to come along with head coach Jonathan Smith. And the guy's really talented. I mean, he came into this year ranked as one of the best transfers in all of college football. One, because he's only a sophomore, and two, because he was a pretty talented 4-star quarterback. But this year specifically, like in losses against Boston College, he's just had a ton of turnovers. Throughout the year, he only has 8 touchdowns and 11 interceptions. He's lost 3 fumbles. And that's the reason why Michigan State is a 4-5 team and not a 6-3 team. But there's been games where he's really shined. I mean, against the Iowa Hawkeyes, he led Michigan State to 32 points. Bottom line, when he plays clean, he's a pretty good quarterback.
But you also know the dangerousness that he has inside of his legs and inside of his arms. So you can't look at the turnovers and say this is his body of work.
Now, Aiden Childs is not the most prolific passer this year, but Michigan State's been helped out by an improved running game this year.
Running game, they've got 2 just really nice pieces coming out of that backfield. They've got K'Ron Lynch-Adams, transfer from UMass. I believe this might be like his 7th year in college football. So, definitely a bit of that seniority. They also have Nate Carter, who transferred from UConn a couple years ago. That was under the past regime. But again, both those guys, they may not have the most impressive rushing numbers overall, but when you have two senior running backs like that coming out of your backfield who can, pick up those tough yards, try to get you those first downs. They offer a little something in the receiving game. It's a really nice asset to have.
Against Iowa and Michigan, I mean, those are two defenses that have usually a pretty good job of stopping the run. Michigan State had 163 yards against Michigan, 212 against Iowa. You're starting to see Michigan State trying to form that identity that they had under Mark D'Antonio a few years ago. Smash mouth defense, smash mouth offense, and starting to hit on those play action passes. And this is a game where Illinois, the Achilles heel this year on defense has been their front seven. It's been their defensive line. Dylan Rosiak, it's been announced he's the middle linebacker starting for Illinois. He's out for the year. He fractured his foot. And it just seems like Illinois has never really replaced the law firm. They never replaced Johnny Noon. They never replaced Keith Randolph. Kansas ran for 6 yards a pop against Illinois earlier this year. Penn State ran the ball like crazy. Purdue dominated Illinois' front seven. Minnesota had a field day. Been times where Illinois has shown up. I mean, Michigan, they played pretty well against them, stopping the run, and also Nebraska. But just Illinois has not found that consistency. So there's a real world like, okay, Aiden Childs isn't hitting his throws. We're going to see Nate Carter probably get 30 carries and try to get over 100 yards. Whether Illinois can stop that, I mean, if you stop Michigan State's running game, you got a really, really good shot of winning that game. Gears talking about Illinois, started the year 6-1. It was a really impressive start. They got up top 20 in the AP poll. But the last 2 weeks have been a reality check. They lost to Oregon 38-9, and that's the kind of game where you can't get too mad at Illinois. You just have to kind of realize Oregon is a national title contender. They have a ton of NIL money. They get players in the transfer portal. Great wide receivers like Evan Stewart. They're able to get Dylan Gabriel. I wish Illinois played better because it's never acceptable to get down 35-3 at halftime. But bottom line, if you just view it in a vacuum, losing to Oregon's not the end of the world. Minnesota is the game you got to win. Minnesota is a game where the talent is pretty similar, but it depends how clean you play. That's who's going to win the game. And Luke Altmaier the last 3 weeks is just not the same quarterback. He's definitely struggled with accuracy over the last 3 weeks and also just bad turnovers. I mean, we're seeing fumbles from Luke that we weren't seeing in the beginning of the year. There was a stretch in the third quarter against Minnesota. He went 0 for 6 in passing. He didn't complete a single pass. And 2 of his passes were actually dropped. They could have been interceptions from Minnesota. It just does seem like Luke Altmaier thrives more when there's more of a rhythm to that offense. End of the first half, he brought Illinois all the way down the field for a field goal attempt. End of the second half, I mean, Illinois went 60 yards. They were hitting Franklin. They were hitting Bryan on these quick throws. We forget that, Luke Altmaier really is an SEC quarterback. He's a guy that committed to Lane Kiffin at Ole Miss. He's a guy that actually played in the Sugar Bowl against Baylor in 2021. I mean, he wants to throw the football around. He wants to get that rhythm. He wants to get that tempo. He's not really your traditional pro-style Big Ten quarterback. He wants to throw it around. It would be great to see, just more quick passes, more intermediate routes, for him, like what we kind of saw with Tommy DeVito in 2022. And the thing that elevates Luke above Tommy DeVito is that he has really good legs. Last year, Luke Altmaier led the Big Ten in scrambling yards. There's been games this year, especially against Michigan, where, he didn't have his best day throwing, but he was picking up first downs with his legs. And the reason why I think, Luke could be such an X factor, just hitting those quick rollouts to Shakari Franklin or LZ or, picking up first downs on read options, it kind of neutralizes an offensive line that is just bottom line been inconsistent this year. Coming into the year, 24/7 Sports that Illinois had the top 6 offensive line in the Big Ten out of 18 teams. Illinois had issues with Zy Chrysler. They've been moving around the rotation in the offensive line. There's been games where they're not able to run the ball. There's been games where Luke gets sacked like crazy. If Luke's able to get the ball out quick, if Luke's able to do read option plays, that lessens the blow. The team goes as far as Luke goes. Nebraska was a really crazy environment earlier this year. That was Nebraska's 400th sellout. Nebraska 3-0. They're ranked. They got Dylan Raiola. I mean, that was a game that they thought they were going to win. But Luke Altmaier played his best game. 21-27. 210 yards, 4 touchdowns, 1 in overtime. Luke had to play borderline perfect for Illinois to win that game. But we've seen when Illinois, when Luke takes a step back, like against Minnesota, where he has a bad third quarter, it's almost impossible for Illinois to win that game. They don't have the running game right now where they can just count on getting 250 yards. Luke has to be the best player every single time. Just kind of the reality when you have a roster of just a lot of 3-stars. If you just look at this team, if they had Devin O'Leary starting at quarterback, it's probably more of a 6-6 program. Illinois' margins of victories this year, Purdue, Nebraska, Kansas. These are really tight games that could go either way. There's a very real world that Illinois is not 6-3. They're 3-6. But it's kind of that tricky situation is, it's like a catch-22. How do you take Illinois to that next level and continue to get those good players? Well, for Illinois, right now, I don't know if they're going to be able to sign the 5-star high school recruits, but it does seem like Illinois has a real avenue to sign those transfer portal guys. Like a guy that's not getting playing time at Oklahoma, a guy that's not getting playing time at USC, Alabama. Brett Bielema should be able to go to those players and say, listen, I can develop you and get you to the NFL. I've done it with Kirby Joseph, Devin Witherspoon, Quan Martin, Sidney Brown. I can get you to the NFL. I coach there. I know what it takes. And I can give you playing time because you are going to be better than maybe some of the 3-stars we have on our roster. And you're experienced. But the issue is, when you're in the bottom third of the Big Ten with funding, you only have so many dollars. It's like the New York Yankees and the Oakland A's. Who's going to sign the better players? Well, it's going to be the Yankees because they can sign Juan Soto for $600 million. They can sign Garrett Cole. They got the cash. It'd be interesting to see if donors can kind of see what Brett's done with a limited budget. I mean, Brett has had one of the worst NIL budgets in the Big Ten, and he was still able to budget and get Luke Altmaier, a good quarterback. That's a 4-star, and he's the best quarterback Illinois has had in years. He was able to get J.C. Davis, the best group of 5 offense linemen in the country last year. He was able to get Zachary Franklin, a talented and proven wide receiver with the most career active receptions in college football. Now, imagine if you double that money. That's when you can start talking about getting transfers to replace John Newton and Keith Randolph. That's when you can get a couple offensive linemen. And I mean, next year, Illinois is going to have some serious gaps that they're going to need to replace. We're talking J.C. Davis gone, Pat Bryant, Zachary Franklin, potentially Luke Altmaier. If Luke Altmaier finishes the year strong, there's going to be schools that are going to be interested in him. There's a possibility that there might be a bidding war. And I know I got a little sidetracked, but bottom line is, do the donors have to see a 9-3 season for them to give Brett the money? Or can they tolerate a 7-5 season and realize, Brett has beat Michigan and a bunch of ranked teams this year. We need to just give him a little bit of money. Personally, I think Illinois should take no chances. Because we've seen in college basketball with Illinois, when you actually build up the win totals of 20, 25 wins, they're going to give you the money to get back Terrence Shannon. And Illinois, they have no business going under 500 in the next 3 games. These are 3 games. If Illinois wants to take the next level as a program, they got to win. I think Michigan State's actually not that bad of a football team. But the fact is, you're home, and Aiden Childs has played extremely inconsistent this year. You're taking on a Rutgers team that lost to UCLA, that got killed by Wisconsin, that got killed by USC. Their quarterback, I can't pronounce his name, but he played at Minnesota last year. He struggled to throw for 125 yards. That is a game that you need to win. Northwestern is going to be lucky to win 4 games this year. There's no way you can lose to David Braum a second time. There is a big difference between 7-5 and 9-3 when it comes to high school recruiting and also just transfer portal acquisition. And now going back to this game, this is a game that Vegas, Michigan State, Illinois, it opened up at 3.5 points. It went down to 2.5. Now Illinois' back is a 3-point favorite. And if Aiden Childs is playing really strong, this might be a difficult game for Illinois, to win. At the same time, you have to remember how far, this program has come. Sometimes somebody like me might get critical. But, it kind of puts it into perspective. Like today, Saturday is going to be senior day for Illinois. This is going to be Brett Bielema's first senior class that's graduated. Guys like Pat Bryant, guys like Ryan Mead, Seth Coleman. I mean, these are guys that have seen a very different program, a very different trajectory in the last 4 years. And, I was talking to Pat Bryant on Thursday during media availability. People forget that he actually committed to play under Lovie Smith. And then 2 days later, he got fired. And then they hired Brett Bielema. And even though Lovie Smith got fired, Pat Bryant stayed. Last year, Pat Bryant's wide receiver coach, George McDonald, left Illinois for Ole Miss. And, I asked Pat, like, was there other offers to leave in the transfer portal? He said, yeah, he had an agent and they were getting a lot of other offers for him to leave and not even be on Illinois this year. But Pat Bryant stayed. Pat Bryant stuck to Brett Bielema and he developed over the course of 4 years. And now he's off to greener pastures. He's going to play in the NFL. He's going to make millions of dollars. And he's the kind of guy that's helped take the program to the next level this year. But it is kind of crazy to just think about what were the expectations in 2019. When I was a freshman in college, me and my buddies used to sit around and we used to just try to circle 6 possible games that they maybe can win. They would lose to Eastern Michigan. They lost to Iowa 63-0 in 2018. They gave up 50-plus points 4 times in 2018. I mean, Lovie Smith just could not get a productive product on the field. And now with Illinois football, 2 of the last 3 years, they've been ranked in the top 20. Brett Bielema's taken them to Florida bowl games. This senior class is what elevated Illinois from bottom dwellers in the Big Ten to one of the top half teams in the conference each year. And, that is not something that everybody expected when Brett Bielema got hired. And Brett Bielema knows, he said senior day, it's a big event. He's been a head coach, for 20 years. He spoke on Friday about what senior day means and he got emotional.
Senior day, I got my Nike shoes last night, right? We get for every home game. And I was sitting there looking at them and our seniors' names are on my shoes, right? And I never thought I'd say this, right? But I just sat there and looked at the shoes because they also represent a lot of great stories, right? And that's why we do what we do.
So kickoff is going to be on 1:30. It's going to be on FS1. Illinois taking on a 4-5 Michigan State team. Michigan State does not have the record. Like, if you just box score watch, you're not going to think they're a very good team. But they played competent against Oregon in the first half. They probably outplayed Michigan. Michigan just had a couple more trick plays. Boston College is a game they gave away. I mean, this is a team that could potentially be in the same spot as Illinois as a 6-3 football team. And they got a really talented quarterback who's sloppy, but if he's locked in, he's going to make it dangerous for Illinois. And this is the game that's kind of vital. This is the game that can kind of kickstart a rebuild or trying to take the program to the next level. I'm just telling you, man, when Brett Bielema wants to talk to donors after the offseason, it's going to be easier getting checks when you're 9-3 and not 7-5. And we've seen, 2022, 2023, those were disappointing Novembers that maybe held the program back. Illinois got a real chance to stick the landing and win these doable games. I'm Carson Gourdie. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for updates about the football game on Saturday.
Thanks for watching. Stick around by subscribing today and don't miss a single video.